Yeah, good morning or afternoon or evening, whenever you happen to be watching this video. Uh, I had a video I made recently, the last one actually, it was called Handy Little Tools and Things, Part 1. Because when I originally made it, it was over 20 minutes long and it wouldn't take. I guess after you do 15 minutes, the videos don't take, or if they do, I don't know how to do it. So anyway, I made this one. This is just simply Part 2 to just go over a couple of points that I didn't get to in the first video. I mentioned about different little tools, like I mentioned, little walnut picks that you can use when you put nostrils in. Those are little tools that look like this that come when you buy walnuts. And if you notice, I curved up the end of it, bent it over a little. So when I'm going to put a nostril into a decoy, I can simply just take that tool, maybe put a slit in there first with a knife, and then just burn that thing in like that. Just press it into there, and I've got myself a teardrop shape nostril, which is what we're hoping to accomplish when we do that. And again, if it gets too big, you put some putty in there, get this thing wet. After that putty sets a little, press it in there, and it'll take the exact form of that tool. So there's enough said on that particular item. I also mentioned to you how I use little tools to create eyes. Simply take some tubing. If you want to make an old decoy that just doesn't have a glass eye, you can press in with this. You can actually start the eye with that and then drill in later. Or I had mentioned about an auger, which is a tool that looks like this. You can find these all over the place in antique malls and flea markets and all. They're just called little mini augers. You just hold them in your hand like this and drill in. Perfect example of an old antique decoy where I use that eye is, I got this one here. The wood was all rotted out and busted up and all. So I cut it in half. I actually sealed the inside with sealer, put some spray in there to make sure there's no bugs or anything in there, and created an old looking decoy. But if you notice, the eye on that decoy is punched in and painted. So that's what I mean when I say you can just create an eye by using a copper tubing and punch it in. So just something, a little bit, an idea if you want to do old birds. And as you can see, I made it look old. I just kind of lightly brushed the paint on there, scraped it a little bit with sandpaper, and left it kind of unfinished. But it looks like it's been laying around for, for a century, so that's just that particular item. When I mentioned about carving decoys, I mentioned that I use paint sticks sometimes, which are things that look like this. I use them to carve a decoy sometimes. I also sometimes use them if I want to paint a head ahead of time. So you can use it for many purposes. And I always suggest if you're gonna be doing carving, always use a finger guard. Usually goes on your thumb because when you're carving, you can't help sometimes going this way. You have to go towards yourself sometimes. Sometimes one side you go away, one side you go this way. I don't know why, but it seems to work that way. But you know, you don't want to bring that knife in and cut your finger. So you always wear these finger guards. They're very helpful tools to have. And you can buy them at most of these industrial tool companies. Okay, there's some tools I've created to make when you do vermiculation on a decoy, which is like a very rough coating on it. They sell these little combs or little metal fingers that you can brush down along the decoy when you're working on it. Sorry, I was standing up and couldn't see my head. But I found it's just as useful to take simple little things like, for example, a little cocktail fork like this, see? Or even a little bigger fork. Or an old comb, you know, like a combing pick or something like that. It's got those spreads in there. And if you're gonna vermiculate on a decoy, you can just kind of put your rough coating on the bird and then take the fork and don't run it this way because you don't want to dig it. Let it come this way. See how it's curved out a little? You just kind of like follow a little bit of a vermiculation pattern like with that. Wipe it off, continue doing it on the top. And it's an easy, simple way to do vermiculation without getting involved with buying vermiculation tools. So that's just one handy little way to do things. Another tool that comes in handy, it's just simply what's known as a chalk pencil. You can get these in fabric shops. You could also get them in Michael's. And it's just a little pen that has a chalk stick in it. You can see it right here, and it's adjustable this way. It comes with a whole bunch of sticks. God, if you get one of these pens, and I have 3 or 4 of them, you get about 15 sticks come with it. Enough for you to do a couple of hundred decoys, which I doubt if I'll be doing that many at this stage of the game. But what's nice with this is when if you do put a dark color on and you cover it and you can't see your pattern, you can't see your feathers, this is just, you know, see, it's white chalk. So let's say I'm just doing this and just putting the feathers in. You see how I put those lines in there? So now I can paint right over that because it disappears. It comes off with water or after you paint. If I put my finger on there and rub it, it's gone. So that's just another little handy little thing. A chalk pencil. They come in white, they come in blue, they come in red. In case, let's say you're working on a white bird and you want to see your feathers, you can't use a white pen, obviously. So you use a blue one or a red one or some other kind of color like that. I'm just checking my notes here because I'm running right along here and I don't want to overwhelm you with stuff or get too crazy. I can't even read my own writing half the time here. Leather. You know, you always have to have extra pieces of leather laying around if you can find leather. See, I made this flexible ruler out of a piece of leather so I can lay it right on the decoy and follow the contour of it. I also use it and do cutouts with it. For example, this is a bird right here that would have a long tail. It's called an old squaw. And what you can do on that is you can gouge that out in the back and put that piece of leather on there. You cut it to size. See, I just simply cut it out, like split it. You put it on the bird. Then you putty up around it and make it there. Now you've got that flexible tail. Because if you do a decoy like that, and that's wood, it's going to be real easy to break it. But now you do it this way, and it's much safer to do it that way. So just an idea of what you can use leather for. I mentioned to you how I sharpen my tools. I found these old barber tools. This is a reversible one. It's got a soapstone on one side, and on the other side, it's got the leather strap. I also found this old barber strop, strictly a strop. I found this at an antique store with the sleeve, and I used that to sharpen my tool. I found this one that has 4 sides on it with a handle. And what I did there was I made one side with a rough piece of leather for stroking, you know, the knife like this. And then the other side is smooth to kind of, you know, clean it up. And on actually the other 2 sides, I actually put sandpaper. If I want to really kind of, you know, gouge in or get a sharp blade on an old knife, I can actually use sandpaper sometimes. So just another little handy little tool that I've come up with that seems to work for me. You know, we were talking before about eyes. When you put the eyes in, a lot of people use sandpaper around them, or then you got to dig them out. And I showed you how you use simply little skewers, things like this, to clean out around the eye of the decoy. Just work yourself around in here because it tends not to scratch the eye. Whereas if you sandpaper it, you will scratch the eye. Now, if you do that, is it ruined? Are you finished? No. No, you're not finished. You can buy just regular plain clear nail polish. You take that nail polish and you just paint it right over the eye, the entire eye, not just the scratch. Just paint it right over the eye. You'll be amazed how to make those scratches literally disappear. Another thing I mentioned to you earlier on decoys was that on the top of decoys, it's usually a little darker pattern on there, you know, compared to the sides being lighter and the top being darker. How do you accomplish that? Well, doing it with a brush is kind of difficult if you don't want to have just a pure straight line. I always talk about having things blend. You can use a variety of brushes to do that. Something like a stencil brush like this, where you can just tap it in. And, you know, it gives a soft edge on it. And of course, you know, you just make sure that brush is almost dry. You just drop on down through there. A lot of people will take a piece of foam, something like this, and just do it with a piece of foam. Just work yourself down through the center and then off to the sides. You can do it with a curved brush because as it's curved, when you go on there, it's not going to hit the 2 sides. It's just going to go down the center. Then you can turn it sideways and just kind of baby it back up into the other ends. And you could always, with your brush later, just keep moving some paint around like that. It's real simple to do. It's easy. Another little tool I meant to show you before, I can see them as I pick them up here, is these are little wooden cocktail forks. You can use these sometimes to do vermiculation. Or just see these little lines in here on the decoy and the head. You can just dip that in paint and just go like that sometimes. Just tick those lines in with a little wooden dowel like that, rather than using a brush. Because what you'll get is a consistent size, as with a brush, depending if you how heavy or how light you are with your hand. When you go on that brush, it kind of messes it up sometimes. So those are just another little tool that's interesting. I mentioned the archival pens. If you got to put your splits in a decoy, like the feather splits in the middle or the splits that go into the sides, it's easier to do it with a brush like a pen like this rather than a brush, because the brush as you're moving will maybe go a little wider, a little narrower, or it might get too heavy, too light. Brushes consistently got a tip on it, and you just, draw your lines in, draw your quills in along the top. You do it on the back here, on the tail, and it just comes in handy to have just a simple little archival pen brush. All these things are available at these stores. Here's the paint stick I used when I started to do this mallard head. As you can see, it's darker on the top. And again, that was just by using something like this and just tapping down and through. When I do these kind of things, sometimes I'll just actually create something with them. I'll go ahead and get these curtain rod that you get in fabric stores. It's an old curtain rod. I just cut it to size, carve out a couple of heads, stick them on there, let it blend down into the stick, use them as bookends, or just as an example of finishing heads. If you don't want to just do it on a decoy, you can do something like that. A lot of fun, a lot of fun. So I just hope these things are all helpful to you. I hate to rush through them. I got so many things I want to talk about. And one problem I've never had is brevity. I can really go on and on. So we don't want to do that. We're going to run out of time. So I'll catch you on the next video. We'll find something else interesting to talk about.